So I want to start with the sky. And when you're painting the sky, use a really big brush. So probably use just the larger brush that you've got. Okay. And for this one, I'm going to use a bit of cerulean blue. So just a bit of this sort of sky blue. Okay. And just drop it in like this. And one wash and go all the way down to the mountains, but stop roughly at the mountains. Okay. You want to make the sky like pretty light. I know on its own it looks funny. It almost looks like it's too weak when you put in the sky, but that's because we don't have any of the dark areas in first. So intentionally make it lighter than you are comfortable with. Okay. The paint's still wet, so you can drop in some colors. You can drop in a bit of purple or something like that for the clouds. Okay. The interesting thing about this paper, it's 100% cotton paper, and it takes a long time to dry. So you have more time to sort of fiddle around with things before your paint starts to dry off. You notice that it spreads a lot better as well. You can see this is just a bit of some clouds I thought I'd put in here. Okay. But to drop in a little bit of color there for the clouds. Okay. Okay. One thing to remember is as you get further down into the painting, the clouds become smaller just on the horizon line. Just drop in some smaller clouds off in the distance. Like this. Darken some of these clouds a bit more. Okay. Just a bit of color there, that's fine. Okay. All right, so you should now have the sky in. You can have sky that's one color, just one simple wash, or you can have sky that's got bits of clouds like what I've done here in it. Up to you. I'm going to pick up a bit of green now. I'm going to make sure this green is pretty dark. So I'm using about 60% color, about maybe 40 to 60% color, and the rest of it's just water. Okay. Just picking up a green, and I'm putting in kind of some yellow into this green as well. Okay. That. Oops. Sometimes you get a bit of Sometimes you get a bit of a mistake where you kind of drop in some paint where you don't want it to. Lift off with the tissue. Okay. And the buildings and stuff that we've drawn in the mountains, just cut around the buildings. Okay. So we're painting a bit of darker green around the buildings. And you might think, I want to create some new buildings in there. So just leave a bit of that white out where you want. Okay. So you're leaving kind of these little areas of white for the buildings. See? You're cutting around the buildings. the main shape you want to get in is just that large mountain. Okay? That large mountain. And
cover all the details. You should have my house.
and the mountains on the right hand side, these little mountains there, you can make them lighter.
You think the lights are green?
For the ones on the right hand side, yeah, I make them a little lighter because those mountains are further in the background. Yeah, if you feel that the mountains are too light, you can still drop in some color while the paper's wet. Stays dry for a fair bit of time.
Also, like,
Okay. All right. So you should have some mountains, bit of the sky. Now, this bit of water, this bit of area underneath the mountains, it's probably still wet. That's fine. But what I like to do is just pick up a bit of blue now. Remember how I asked you guys to grab some of that darker blue? Yep. So then I just start picking up that darker blue and drop that in underneath the mountains, like this, just where the boats are. And again, we're going to cut around the boats. So we're going to leave them white. Can mix even a tiny bit of yellow into your blue to create a turquoisey sort of color as well. Okay. That Prussian blue is a good color actually to do this sort of water because it has a greenish hues in it, and I find that they look quite nice with the mountains. Okay. So notice how I'm just cutting around the boats. You're leaving a lot of white areas, and this takes a lot of self-control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see. What am I painting? I need to look at the reference too. But you can see we've sort of cut around a lot of the boats and stuff like that. Looking good. Just add in a bit of yellow where the blue joins on to the foreground. And then notice like I'm cutting around the boats even in the foreground, the little figure here as well. I'm trying to just mix in a bit of green in there. Oops. Okay. The trick here is to blend the blue into a kind of a yellow down the bottom without it turning green. So the trick to that is to let the blue dry just enough.
Okay.
It's still wet, but it's not completely wet. And then you add in the yellow. So there's like a bit of a transition.
Is that yellow to the sand bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yep.
It's the potential. Keep doing it.
Okay. Another thing that I'll show you as well is practicing a bit of wet to make the waves, because often when you paint water, it's going to look, there's going to be waves and stuff in it. So what I like to do is pick up a smaller brush. So using the small brush like that, and I'm going to pick up some darker pigment. I'm going to pick up a bit of neutral tint or just a bit of really dark blue mixed with a bit of brown or red or something like that. And then you can just paint in, these little waves like this. You need to make sure the paint's really thick though on your brush. So you're using it almost at full concentration, and see how you're just dropping little bits of it in like this. And this is just indicating some waves, okay? Indicating some little waves. It makes that water look more interesting rather than it being one flat sort of area. So now we've got a bit of life, a bit of something happening in the water. Okay. Cool. Sometimes you might, for example, these mountains on the right-hand side, they look a bit too weak now that it's dried. So you can still go back into it, just fix it up or darken in some areas because it still hasn't dried yet. This paper takes ages to dry. So we can go back in there and just add in a little bit of color. If those mountains have kind of disappeared off somewhere. Okay. Cool. Now moving into the foreground, we're going to add a bit of yellow. Okay, I'm going to pick out some of this yellow ochre color. You can use whatever yellow that you want. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to drop it in there. Okay, like this. Cut around those boats. Okay, like that. Keep it very light. Keep that yellow almost, it's mostly just water in here. That's okay. If you use too much, you can still water it down a bit. Okay. So, you should have something that looks like this now. Okay. And that's it. That's the first layer. Second layer is just adding in some small details for the boats, the people, maybe some trees, sharper trees in the background. But at the moment, it doesn't look like much. Okay, so what we want to do now is bring out the details. So at the moment, it's just all colors, and you can see a bit of differentiation between the ground, the water, between the mountains. But what I want to do is, firstly, it kind of just sticks out to me. I want to put in a bit more darkness into the mountains in some areas, like here. Okay, so this can just be, and if you use a round brush looks a bit like a tree. You just dab it on an area, it really looks like a tree. But I like to dry off. I'll pick up a bit of paint, dry off the brush a bit, and then dab on. And that will create a kind of like a broken edge tree. It's called dry brushing. When you're using paint, dry off the brush, and then you just sort of add it in so that you kind of have some broken edges. Okay, that reveal a bit of the texture of the paper. So this is a little technique that you can play with to just bring some of the trees back. Okay. Of course, we've got the buildings here as well. And one of the things I like to do is maybe add some color into the buildings. So bit of yellow. I want to drop in a bit of yellow for the buildings. Some of them you might want to leave white. Okay. But I just want to drop in a bit of color for those buildings. Indications of them in the distance. And around the buildings, you know, just putting in some of these little indications of trees, these sharper looking trees and shapes here in the distance, okay? Keep in mind that as you move further and further back in the distance, the trees get smaller, okay? Actually, there's so much going on in this reference photo. I prefer actually doing a sketch of a reference photo and then basing my painting off the sketch, because sometimes the reference can be a bit much. Put in some more, another layer of these trees on the right-hand side of these mountains. Okay, I'm making those trees a bit lighter on the right-hand side as well. If you guys ever want to get a bit closer to see what I'm doing as well, you're free to come around and have a look. Yeah, you're not gonna distract me or anything. Yeah. So you're slowly just building up details and things in here, bit by bit. Okay. Little bit of color for the boat. So I'm going to be using maybe a bit of red or something. Very light colors for the boats. Keep them, when you're putting color into the boats, use just a very thin wash. Okay. This boat here in the front has a bit of blue in it on top, like that. Indicate some of these like stripes on them. So I like to just change the colors of the boats a bit so that they don't look all the same. At the same time, I also like to leave some of the boats white, because you're leaving some of them white just creates the larger contrast. Same thing with the people. You can start putting in a bit of color for the people. For example, just a bit of orange for this person's shirt. I thought might be nice. Bit of red for this person here. Okay. Bit more red or warmer color there. Bit of yellow here for this person. Okay. Bit of color in there. Right. Okay. So really, at this stage, we're slowly bringing out the details. Okay. Smaller bits of details. Distance. I mean, it might be early, but I usually put in sometimes I like to put in some birds. I'll do that later. I'll show you how to do that later. Okay. The area for you guys, the water, is it mostly dried on your painting? Mostly dried, yeah. Okay. So yeah, just add a bit of color in for the boats, and then what I'll do is show you how to bring out the sails. And I have a bit of whitewash. It's kind of like the secret little thing at the end that I pop in. Okay. While I'm actually here in the foreground, guys, I'm going to put in the shadows of the figures and of these like boat shapes just while I'm here, okay? So I'm going to be using some darker color, a bit of kind of purplish color, okay? Usually do the legs a bit darker, as you can see here. It just brings out the figures better. Of course, I've got to pick a light source. I think the light source is coming straight from above anyway, so I'll just paint in a little shadow underneath the figures like this. Oops, join the legs kind of thing, like that. These bits of darkness underneath the boat as well, pretty important. And then bit of darkness under the boat. You can even indicate some windows on the boats as well. Little, tiny little windows or areas of darkness in the boat. Put in a bit of color for the figures' heads. Just put in some of this like reddish, you can color, reddish browny kind of color is fine, whatever you want. You know, can even put in a bit of hair. Bit of hair on the top of these, on the heads of the figures. That. I'm just putting a few little brush strokes in the foreground to indicate maybe some grass or something growing on the edges. Just to, I don't know, just to change things up a bit. Very light, very, very light color. It's super important to preserve the light on the bottom. Yeah. Don't worry if you haven't. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you might get a bit of that, you know, seaweed and stuff like that that come up near the shore as well. You can just indicate stuff that's maybe washed up there. It's up to you. Okay. Bit of darkness on the houses, under the rooftops. Sometimes I find that a little bit of darkness at the bottom of the boats helps to anchor them better, like this. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I've got a bottle. What I like to do is pick a small brush, a small round brush like this, and then I'll grab a bit of this white paint. I'll put a bit of water, just a little bit of water so that it's not too thick, so it's activated. And then you can do things like this. You can put in the masts of the boat. See? See? That's why I went pretty dark.
Yeah, that's fine. Also, that I can do watercolor.
So it's kind of like a secret technique. And notice when I'm drawing them in, I try to do it in one go. If you go too close and you're like this, it's gonna look too forced. So try to do the mask in 1 or 2 strokes. You know, just a quick little thing like that. Even if it skips over the paper slightly. Sometimes you get these smaller bits of rigging and stuff. So there, here. Even if it skips over the paper, like as you can see here, like the lines aren't completely visible. I don't know much about boats. I don't know what you call these, but I'm just going to say it's rigging. But you know, even if you skip over the paper a little bit, it kind of looks like the light's catching onto it. So any areas that you've lost some light, you can just bring back by using that gouache. But you got to use it pretty sparingly. Even for the figures here, a bit of gouache on the heads and the shoulders area, whatever, there, here, like that. Bring back a little bit of detail. In the houses, or you might think to yourself, kind of want some more houses in the background, so I can just draw one in. Some gouache. There. Sometimes it does look good as well, with a bit of the reflection of the mast in the water like this. You can sort of, very light reflection. Okay. Bit of reflection. Soft sort of wave-like effects, like this, lighter waves in the water. Okay, so it's pretty basic. I think
Well, at least it wasn't informed.
these are just some little birds that we can put in, just like adding in these little V kind of shapes in the sky, and that makes it look like there's some birds, and it also connects up the sky with the trees and stuff like that. Just makes it so the sky is not all kind of by itself, kind of thing. Okay. I'm not the most patient person with drawing.
I'm having deficits trying to.
I think both are hard to do.
Yeah.
When you look at those like hyper realistic painters as well, I really admire what they can do.
Oh, absolutely.
But God, I don't know if I could sit there for 100 hours and do that.
Oh, no, you have your own style.
Yeah. So that's it. That's mine. That's the end of it.
Wow.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Okay.